This is a DIY speaker kit. It comes with everything you need to build a Bluetooth speaker, including pre-cut MDF parts to build your speaker box. But we're not really going to need these. I actually do need these. If you watched my channel before or you saw the thumbnail, then you know where this is going. That's right, I'm going to be making a Kerf bent speaker box. The MDF box that came with the kit is sized perfectly to work with the components that came with the kit, like the speaker and this other stuff I know nothing about. So I'm going to use this as a reference for what my minimum dimensions for my Kerf bent speaker box should be. After getting my minimum dimensions that I need, which happens to be right under 18 inches wide, 5.5 inches tall, and 7.5 inches deep, I can figure out how long of a piece of wood I need and where to set up for my kerf cuts. Now, I know I will be getting questions on how I figure out the spacing for the kerfs and how deep to go. And to be honest, there's two things that I do. The first one is I head over to this website where I plug in all my information of what I need my radius to be, how thick my material is, and what bit I'm going to be using. The second thing that I do after putting my information on the website and getting my spacing is I make test pieces. This is the test piece with the exact spacing and number of cuts the site told me to do. As you can see, it has a little bit of a gap in between the curves. And this is the spacing after removing one of the cuts. So instead of going with 14 kerfs like the site told me to do, I'm going to be doing 13. This is why it's important to test on scrap wood before you go all in on expensive wood. I decided to take inspiration from my old floating shelf I made over a year ago and add a 30-degree taper to the front of my speaker box. It's much easier to do this now over at the table saw when the board is still flat. Since I plan on having my front panel and speakers inset a little bit, I added a 3/8 inch deep groove, half an inch away from the edge of my board. This is also much easier to do now when the board is still flat. I made my first pass on the table saw and nudged the fence over to give me a 1/4 inch groove. No, you don't need a CNC to do this, but the CNC will make it much safer and accurate when cutting your curves. I've done this process multiple times with a handheld router and a jig, but it could definitely get a bit sketchy. Just in case you're interested, I'll leave a link to the router bit that I'm using down below in the description. Another common question I get when I make projects like this is how much material am I leaving at the bottom of the kerf? The simple answer is 0.09 inches of material is left at the bottom of my kerf. I found this to be the sweet spot for materials that I use like poplar, pine, walnut, and basswood. I lay the board on the biggest container that I can find. In this case, it's going to be the lid of a tote, and I soak it with hot water. With walnut, I found that letting it sit for 3 to 5 minutes works pretty good. I've learned a lot over the years when it comes to this craft, and the most valuable thing I could tell you when doing this technique is to slow down and keep your wood wet by using hot water or steam. I can't believe it took me 2 years to pick up a steamer, but I highly recommend it. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. I got this one off Amazon for around $30 and it's so worth it. Another tip I could give is to avoid having knots in the area where the wood is going to be bending. The wood around the knot is much easier to crack and the knot itself is much harder, making this entire area much difficult to bend. Okay, that went perfect. A little too perfect. I've never had anything gone that smoothly before when I kerf bend, but I'm glad it did. Right now it's in the clamps, it is drying. I'm letting the water dry out a little bit before I add glue. But before I could do that, I'm gonna need to take measurements from the inside here for my dados for my front panel, and I need to cut that out of some basswood. My front panel is made from basswood to give the walnut and speakers a nice contrast. I'm planed down my basswood to 1/2 inch thick to keep the weight of the speaker down. Once I had my wood milled, I headed back to the CNC to cut my speaker locations and the final shape of the panel. I actually had to stop mid-pass because one of my tool paths was wrong, but I was able to catch it before I did any actual damage. Yes, using a CNC is still woodworking. The wood didn't get there by itself. Okay, now that I have my front panel done and I tested both my speakers, the big and the small one, and they fit in there perfectly, I need to go ahead and route out a rabbet on the back side of my panel so it's thin enough to fit in the groove that I have here in my case. Because my front panel is 1/2 inch thick, it's interfering with the speakers a bit. The pins on the back of the speaker are hitting the sidewall opening and need a little bit more room. No problem, I just used my spindle sander to notch out a space big enough to give me the clearance that I need. And since basswood is a softwood, it didn't take much time. My original plan was to glue the front panel in place, but after taking wood movement into consideration, I don't think that's the best option. I could leave the panel as a floating panel since it's cut slightly undersized of the dado, but I might get some rattles when the speaker is on. The solution I came up with was to use spaceballs. Spaceballs are commonly used when building cabinet doors with solid wood panels. They give the panel a snug fit so it doesn't rattle around, while also giving it enough space for wood expansion. I guess we'll find out if this is going to work when we test out the speaker later on. I did add a little bit of glue to the center of my panel to lock that part into place. On my last build like this, I did not reinforce the two butt joints together, and a lot of people in the comments mentioned how it would fail because this is an end grain to end grain connection. Honestly, I have no idea if it's failed or not. I ended up selling it, but I haven't heard back from the guy. This time around, I'm gonna take the advice of the people and reinforce the butt joint at the bottom of the speaker case with the bow tie. Using a bow tie inlet template, I was able to cut out my bow tie using a router and a bandsaw. I can then route out the female part on my speaker box. For the back panel, I cut out a spot for my control panel and 2 holes for 2 part tubes that go on the back of the speaker, also using the CNC. While that's going on, I'm routing out a 1/2-inch rabbet on the back edge of my speaker box so that the back panel can sit flush with the back of the speaker and not be visible from the sides. I decided to keep the feet simple to not take away the main focus of the speaker. I cut out half circles and glued them inset from the edge of the speaker box using CA glue and wood glue. The CA glue is going to hold it temporarily until the wood glue dries. Now with the speaker box pretty much done other than some sanding and finishing, I want to go ahead and add the electronics just to see if the electronics are working properly and to see if everything is going to fit inside this case. I'm not an electronics guy, but this kit comes with some pretty good instructions that even a dummy like me could put this together. It's not all plug and play though. I did have to solder a total of 4 wires. I don't know what these are or what they do, but I do know that I need to secure them to the inside of the speaker box. Since I don't have access from the top, I couldn't get a drill or screwdriver in the case to screw them down, so hot glue will have to do. Alright, so everything is wired up, hopefully correctly and installed, so I'm gonna go ahead and plug it in for the first time and see if it works. I'm gonna turn it on. I have lights. Charging, power, Bluetooth. That's awesome. Oh, let's go. Now that I can confirm it's all working, I can take it all apart again to sand it and apply my finish. I went with my go-to finish, Danish oil, just because it's super easy to apply and it keeps the wood looking natural. After applying 2 coats and letting the finish dry, I can reinstall my speakers. I pre-drilled all my holes, but apparently I didn't drill them big enough because when I was screwing in this corner, the wood split on me. I didn't glue the back panel in place. Instead, I ended up using some brass screws to give it a higher quality look and feel. I made sure to use flathead screw heads so that people in the future know that this was built by a pro. At this point, the speaker is done, but this is a portable Bluetooth speaker, and at this point, it's not very portable. I don't just want to screw in one of those ugly handles to the top of the speaker box and call it done. I want something that's removable within seconds and matches the shape of the speaker box. I'm going to bend some basswood into the shape of the speaker box, but I'm going to make it a bit larger, and you'll see why in a bit. Do you guys remember at the beginning of the video when I said this? I make test pieces. Yeah, well, I didn't take my own advice and I paid the price. Not sure what happened, but when I was scaling this up, something went wrong and I got way too much bend on this board, making it useless for this application. Eventually, I figured out my mistake and got it to work, Somehow I ended up with 13 kerfs instead of the 13 I'm supposed to have. I also added a baby bow tie to the top of the handle to give it more strength and to make it look cool. This basswood arch thing is 3.5 inches deep and not very comfortable to hold on to. On what would be the top and where the bow tie is, I marked and cut some material away to make the handle more narrow and to make it more comfortable to hold on to. I also softened off all the edges with a round over and the handle was ready to be handled.